Hi everybody. Let's talk about another way to secure information on personal devices. The last video we did on Windows MAM. Windows MAM is great. It is still limited to the browser experience and even more limited because you need to use Microsoft Edge with a work profile. That's fine. We can get that going. But we assume that Windows MAM will expand into other applications in the future, hopefully the near future. And Windows MAM is great. It does give us the ability to curtail that personal Windows device experience into a browser, and we can actually prevent people from exfiltrating information from that browser. So if someone opens up Outlook, we can keep them from downloading, copying, pasting somewhere else, even printing if we want to. Same thing if they open up a document from some location like Teams or OneDrive. They can't copy out of that and paste somewhere else. They can't download. We're going to talk today about the older way, still valid way, to do a similar thing, and this is called app enforced restrictions. App enforced restrictions refers to restrictions that we put in cloud apps, specifically really SharePoint and Exchange, which provides most of the functionality that we're talking about and the things that we're worried about. Obviously, Exchange Mailbox. SharePoint accounts for both Teams sites, that's where Teams sites, all the files you put in Teams, that's where they're stored, SharePoint, and also OneDrive. That's where everyone's OneDrive is stored. So we're going to talk about that. Now, app enforced restrictions also indicates that we have to do work inside of Exchange and inside of SharePoint. We actually tell Exchange, hey, we're going to turn this thing on to allow read-only type of access. We're going to have to say the same thing in SharePoint. Once we do that, and I'll show you where you go to do that in the demo. Once we do that, nothing will happen until we put the real teeth into it, which again is a conditional access policy. Conditional access policies are where we say, hey, for these users on unmanaged devices, go ahead and use those app restrictions that we put into place in Exchange and SharePoint. So we're doing this through the conditional access policies. There's actually part of a conditional access policy called use app enforced restrictions. So if you're sitting on an unmanaged device, and we've gone over how to determine that, we'll go over that again briefly today. If you're sitting at an unmanaged device, you get a curtailed access, a more or less of a read-only access. We can do a little bit more with the app enforced restrictions than we could do as a user, than we could do with the Windows MAM, for instance. We can do copy and paste. So it's not as good, but it's actually a little bit easier to set up, and it works on many more platforms. So today we're going to see how it works with Macintosh, because it would be the way that you would do things for Macintosh. There's no Macintosh MAM that we can set up, mobile application management, for Macintosh in Intune. We can't do that just yet. Maybe that's coming in the future, maybe not. But we still have the app enforced restrictions method to do it for MAM. So let's take a look at that. Let's start out looking at SharePoint. So here I have my SharePoint admin center. What I'm looking for is under policies and access control. So this has been around for a while. We're looking for a setting called unmanaged devices. Seems simple enough, and really it is. The default, of course, is allow full access from desktop, mobile apps, and the web. And what the setting we're looking for is allow limited web-only access. Now, this is going to be global for all of SharePoint sites, meaning also Teams sites, OneDrive. So can we be more specific than that? Yes, we can be more specific than that. Instead of doing it this way, we can do it site by site. We can do that a few ways. Some things we can do the GUI, more that we can do in PowerShell. But even better than that, we can actually apply sensitivity labels, container labels to SharePoint sites, and of course Teams sites same thing. And those can contain the settings that prevent unmanaged devices from connecting willy-nilly and impose these app enforced restrictions. So if you want to do it site by site and you have the license for Microsoft 365 E3, Microsoft Business Premium, those both have this license. You should actually look into creating sensitivity labels. These are container labels. We're not talking about labels that apply to files and emails. Microsoft decided to bundle these two things together, even though really they got nothing in common, but you go to the same place to create them. So create container-based sensitivity labels and allow people, that way you can allow people to choose if this is a site that we want to put these restrictions on or not. So we're just going to do it globally. I've already done it, allow limited web-only access. Now be careful when you create this, when you click on this and click on Save. SharePoint is going to create two conditional access policies because we need conditional access, again, for the teeth on this. Without conditional access, none of this will work. So we have to have conditional access policies that limits browsers and also blocks desktop apps from unmanaged devices. Well, we don't want the ones created. So what you want to do after you click on this and you click on Save, you'll see these weird 2 extra conditional access policies. They say SharePoint on them. Just get rid of them. We're going to create 2 other ones. So this is the SharePoint configuration. What about Exchange? Well, Exchange is done a different way. Exchange is done with an OWA mailbox policy. Now, OWA mailbox policies have a bunch of settings on that dictate how people access their mailbox using a browser, of course. So, and there's just a ton of stuff in there. We're really just looking for one setting inside of there. It's called a conditional access policy. It's a parameter. So here you can see I've already typed in a couple of commands. I did a get OWA mailbox policy and pipe that into a format list name just to see how many there were, because mailbox policies, OWA mailbox policies, were in addition to just a bunch of settings that you can put in to restrict access or enhance access, you could actually apply them to different people, to different mailboxes. So the first step you want to do here is take a look and see if anyone has created extra OWA mailbox policies, because if you get one mailbox policy, you don't get another one. So you may have to put this same parameter into several of your OWA mailbox policies if you have them. I only have one. Probably 99% of the tenants out there just going to have one OWA mailbox policy. They were a little more prevalent back in the day when everyone had on-premise Exchange servers, but we don't use them too much these days. So you can see I have a get OWA mailbox policy. I've piped that into a format list and just shown the conditional access policy parameter. I can see all of the properties of this default OWA mailbox policy because I only have one. You can see there's quite a few. That's why I didn't just do this. Just a ton of stuff in here, from booking information to what's enabled in OWA, tasks, calendar stuff, things like that. We normally want to leave all this stuff alone, but if you want to come in here and take a look at it sometime, there's a bunch of other settings you can get from this. But this is where we find the app enforced restriction for Exchange. It's built into the OWA mailbox policy. Hopefully you just have the one default one, so we can set that parameter on the default one. Again, let me do this one again, and you can see the parameter we're looking for is conditional access policy read only. There's also one, and if you look up the set-OWA mailbox policy command, and you look at the conditional access policy parameter, you'll see it accepts 3 options: none, read only, which I have, and read only and block attachments, or words to that effect. Read only means pretty much what it says. You're going to be able to read stuff. You're going to be able to open attachments. You just can't download them. The read-only plus blocking of attachments means you can't even look at the attachments. So because you can open up attachments, you could copy and paste out of them. In fact, even with the SharePoint restrictions, you can open up a SharePoint document and you can copy out of there. Again, something that we can control with Windows MAM, but something that we cannot control, the copy and paste stuff, from the older way to do it, which is the app enforced restrictions. All right, so that's the beginning. We have our setup correctly. Now I'm going to go and look at conditional access policies and how they play into this, because until we change our conditional access policies, we're really not doing much of anything here. So I'm going to come into my Entra ID. I'm going to go under Protection, Conditional Access Policies. I'm going to filter this out. I have a couple of conditional access policies that I've created that start out with MAM-Macintosh because I'm focusing this on Macintosh. I could focus this, or I don't have to focus this on any platform. I could just have them all incorporated in here. Windows, Macintosh, even Android and iOS, but I don't want to do that for Android and iOS because I have a much better way to do Android and iOS. I have mobile application management for both of those, where you can actually use applications from the App Store, like Outlook Mobile, Teams Mobile. Much better way to do things. We have a video on that that we'll be redoing sometime, but take a look at that. I'll try and put a link in the description for that. All right, so MAM Macintosh, and I've done it this way because I do have already Windows Mobile Application Management. I've called this one MAM Macintosh. It's not MAM. It's app enforced restrictions, but when you get a lot of conditional access policies, it's nice to start naming them with something that kind of incorporates their general function. So it's not really MAM, but I called it that. Forgive me. So I have two of them in here, and again, these actually will look very, very similar to the SharePoint ones that automatically get created. But we don't want those because they're SharePoint. They have settings in it that we don't want. So we really want to create our own. So let's look at both of these. First of all, an explanation of what each of them does. The top one, block desktop app access to Office 365 for non-compliant computers. These are unmanaged computers. I could have said unmanaged. What is a managed computer, though? In my case, I'm considering any desktop that is compliant, that is reported that it's compliant, it follows my compliance policies. I'm going to consider those managed. I can use compliance. I can use device filtering if I want to, like maybe it's entry joined, entry registered, whatever. But for Macintosh specifically, compliance is very good because we don't have a lot of different entry joined options for Macintosh computers. So I'm just going to use compliance for that. Why off O365, Office 365? That's really the only thing we can focus on. In fact, we're really focusing on the Exchange Cloud app and the SharePoint Cloud app. In fact, we used to just choose those two apps for these conditional access policies. Recently, though, Microsoft has started recommending we use the Office 365 object for our target app, which includes Exchange and SharePoint. The reason they did that is we can also do some restrictions for the administrative console itself, that portal. So Office 365, much easier to choose that, and that's what we're going to be doing. The second one, restrict browser sessions, app enforced restrictions for non-compliant computers. So again, non-compliant computers are going to get this, and it's going to be, again, Office 365 access, only we're going to limit those people. Why do we have two? We have two because we don't want people using desktop apps at all if their machines are not compliant. We don't want them using those desktop apps because those desktop apps can sync information down to the hard drive and leave it there. We don't want that. Now, this isn't going to go and delete all that stuff that's already there. That is what it is. It's already there. We can't reach out and grab it and bring it back. These are unmanaged devices. If they were managed, well, yes, we'd have a lot more options then. But on unmanaged devices, we don't have a lot of options on going back and getting rid of stuff that's already been synced down. So this is just a future thing. So let's take a look at the block one. A little simpler. I'm going to click on this one. I can choose everybody, exclude certain people, whatever. Normally I do everybody because we're going to be excluding people based on the conditions after that. But in this case, I just have some pilot users in there. The target resource, I'll click on that. It's Office 365. Okay? Exchange, SharePoint, a few other things. Network, I don't have. Conditions, well, in my case, I put a few conditions in here. One is the device platform. I only want this to hit Macintosh computers. I have a different solution for Windows. I have a different solution for Android and iOS, so I'm just focusing this on Macintosh. Client apps. Well, anything but a browser. In reality, we're probably not using ActiveSync or other clients, but I'm going to choose those anyway just in case, and those will have a tough time connecting. I don't want browser in there because that's one I want to exclude. So this is going to be Outlook, OneDrive, Teams, the actual fat apps that could sync stuff down and that fall outside of this app enforced restrictions. The app enforced restrictions are browser-based only. That's all that they can handle. All right, and then filter. Well, my filter here is going to be an exclude filter. I'm excluding any device that reports itself as compliant. So if you're sitting on a compliant device and you open up Outlook, no problem. If you're sitting on a device that cannot report itself as compliant, problem. So we prevent you from using those fat apps. Now you're forced into using a browser-based app. Of course, we're going to have to tell users about this, do a little education. Yes, we'll get help desk calls anyway, but what else is new? All right, so that's pretty much it. What do we do when all of those conditions are met? Well, we block access, as we can see under the grant control. So they're just completely blocked. All right. Let's go back and take a look at this other one. Restrict browser sessions. Well, this one's going to be very similar. Same users, same app, Office 365. Conditions here, well, conditions here are going to be very similar. We're going to, again, include, in my case, the Macintosh platform. The client apps, this time, it's a flip-flop. We're focusing on browser access to Office 365. Right? We are going to exclude, I like to do this, I still exclude any device that's compliant to make sure that those compliant people, if they want to use a browser, they're not restricted. Makes sense. All right, so we got all that set up. What happens when those users who are sitting on a non-compliant computer going to Office 365 do so through the browser? What happens to them? Well, they're granted, first of all, and then right below that, I have a session control. I'm going to click on the session control, and you can see here, it says use app enforced restrictions. This is specific to the SharePoint and Exchange app enforced restrictions. They just built that, Microsoft built that into conditional access. You see under there, use conditional access app control. Well, that's an even better way to do things if you have a cloud app security broker license that is not just a discovery license, which means you got a Microsoft E5 or you got the security and compliance add-on. So that's a much more robust one. We can put our own messages in there. We can be very detailed as to what people can do and what they can't do. But for the lower license, which most companies fall into, app enforced restrictions, what we're doing, very simple, and it comes with those simpler licenses. All right, so we've set it all up. So what's the user's experience going to be? Well, let's take a look. Now I have a couple of windows open for two other users. As you can see here, I have a user called MIG-User2. This is a restricted user. This is a user that falls into that conditional access policy. Again, I would normally make that conditional access policy hit everybody, but I want to give you an idea of the experience from a user that meets the criteria and is restricted, and compare that to a user that doesn't meet that criteria. Presumably they would be on a managed device, but in this case, I pulled a little trickery and I just didn't put that user into the criteria. So it's gonna look like they're a compliant user or they're sitting on a compliant device. All right, so first of all, let's do a MIG user 2. Here's MIG user 2. I can see that I have Outlook, OWA, and I have Teams, which could be SharePoint, but I've done Teams here, same thing. And here's the user, and there's an attachment called Budget Report. The second I click on this, I can see immediately your organization doesn't allow you to download or print attachments from this device or browser. I can still view the attachments. Again, I could block that entirely with that set OWA mailbox policy command, but I haven't. I've chosen the lesser and the more functional way to do things. You can still view those. For more information, of course, contact your IT administrator. Please don't do that. Just call the help desk. All right, so I can still click on this report. It opens it up in Word, and again, even though I've opened it up here and I can see it, it still says your organization doesn't let you download, print, or sync devices. Look at this error. It's a little less descriptive, depending on your point of view. Use a device that's joined to a domain. What? Yeah, that's kind of a holdover from SharePoint on-premise. They just never changed it. We'll again have to address that through user education. Now, check this out. I can actually right-click on this information I just highlighted, choose copy, and I can actually paste that out to Microsoft Word, like the actual application. There it is. So, not the perfect thing, not what we get with mobile application management in Windows or even on phones, iOS and Androids. You know, yes, those are better. We're actually talking to those applications and telling them what to do. This is an older version of things. It's still pretty darn good, but yes, it does allow people, if they wanted to do a copy and paste. You have to put a lot of effort in, and let's be honest, if someone wants to exfiltrate information, they're going to find a way to do it. We've made it very, very difficult for them. And at the end of the day, they could just take a picture, right? All right, so let's go and take a look at what happens for another user. We're going to pretend this user is on a managed device, a Macintosh device that is compliant. Okay? Let's just consider this person compliant. They got the same email from a different user called MIG user 3. They sent them this person the same email. This is Beth. When I click on this, I don't see anything here that tells me that anything's not allowed. I see that I'm using labeling here and some retention, you know, the usual stuff. Here's the same budget report. I'll click on this. I can see it opens up. No restrictions in here. I can download it. I have the download button here. If I click on download, sure enough, it downloaded it. So this user is able to do whatever they want in the browser. So that's the difference between a browser experience from a compliant or managed device, which we're looking at now, and a non-compliant or unmanaged device, which is that MIG user 2's experience. One last thing we'll take a look at. I'm going to open up a FAT client. And in this FAT client, I see I have MIG user 2's account. Yes, I've added that in here. This is the full Outlook. So what's going to happen when MIG user 2 tries to sign in? They're prevented. So this is the error that this user is going to see. It doesn't meet the criteria to access the resource. Again, not the most descriptive thing in the world. You can't change the descriptions here. So again, user education on what's going to happen if you use your personal device, which we assume these devices will be, to access Office 365 resources. FAT clients won't work. Teams, or the OneDrive app or Outlook, they're not going to work. They're going to be forced into a browser access, and that access is going to be for the most part, read-only, although we've seen that you could actually copy and paste out of there. Well, that's just something that we'll have to deal with and continue down the road to better security in the future when Microsoft comes out with the true mobile application management for Macintosh. For right now, though, we're waiting for that mobile application management for Windows to get a little better. Let's bring in Outlook. Let's bring in Teams. So, and the OneDrive Sync app. So hopefully that'll be coming along. There are ways that we can do things and prevent that stuff a little more heavy-handed on the devices themselves. But if it's an unmanaged device, we get a little constrained. We're not able to reach out to a device and start shutting stuff down because it's not under our full MDM control. All right, so that's it. That's how we would do app-enforced restrictions. In this case, it was for Macintosh, but again, we could do it for everything, for all of our desktops. So I hope you enjoyed this version of restricting personal devices. App enforced restrictions is a very good option for both Windows and Macintosh. Windows has maybe a slightly better option with Windows MAM, although if you remember, there are some limitations there, a little bit more setup involved from the user's point of view. They have to use a work profile. If they already had a work profile, and if they already had the device registered, then there's problems there. If the device is already enrolled, if they accidentally screwed up and clicked on the OK button, left that little checkbox saying, allow your company to manage this device, then they're enrolled in MDM. Well, we have problems with that. So there's things like that that you'll have to look at and get your Intune house in order. Also, try and prevent people from adding their personal devices to Intune. So there's a little more of an issue with that than the app enforced restrictions method. But even in the app enforced restrictions method, imagine I'm sitting at a Macintosh computer, like I am, while I was doing my demos, and I downloaded the company portal, and I enrolled in Intune with the company portal. I just walked through the steps. My Macintosh gets into Intune, and Intune tells it the compliance policy, and what do you know, my Macintosh can meet those compliance settings. Maybe it's got an antivirus, maybe it's got drive encryption on. Now it's compliant. It's my personal device, but it's now become compliant. Well, guess what? It's going to be treated just like a company resource then, and it's going to be allowed full access. So no matter what, getting your Intune house in order is a great step. Preventing people from enrolling personal devices, Windows and Macintosh, I would point to first of all, into fully into Intune, even though it seems like a good idea. Yeah, we'll get control over those devices. But in reality, yeah, then we're going to get complaints. We're going to try and install stuff. The user's going to uninstall it because they're an administrator on their device. There's going to be conflicts there. So it's an imperfect world having users enroll their own devices. Plus, they can become compliant. And that's really the thing we're trying to avoid. All right, everybody, please click on subscribe. Tell everybody you know about this channel. Let's build up my viewership a little bit so I can keep bringing these to you. Give me some encouragement. Leave me some comments. Let me know what you want to hear about in the future. And stay safe out there.